Hello one and all, and welcome to this most fabulous of Fridays' Kerbal Space Promo Adventure, in which we will be embarking on the legendary Jool 5 challenge, the ultimate challenge, as the subreddit challenges thing described it. And it's going to be a long video, like, oh my god, look at that video length. If you'd prefer to watch something a little bit more abridged, then you can check out the pinned comment at the top of the comment section, or in the link in the video description itself. You'll be able to find like a link to a much shorter music video version of this mission. But you know, I kind of wanted to showcase, because this is quite a big scale mission, I didn't want to cut too much out, so this is kind of, you know, I ended up with quite a long video. But some of you may be wondering at this point, Matthew, magnificent aficionado, what exactly is a Jool 5 mission? Well, I'm glad you asked that, random viewer. It's a mission plan that involves landing on the surface of every single moon in the Jool system, of which there are 5, hence, you know, hence Jool 5, and then return to Kerbal. But to make things even harder for myself, I'll be landing a Kerbal on every moon, rather than just sending a probe, and I'll be not using any mining equipment or any refueling tactics or anything like that. But, as I'm sure you can see from the screen, the biggest handicap I gave myself, it's probably already obvious, like I said, it's on the screen, but for the less astute among you, what we'll be doing is doing this mission in an SSTO, that is right. The Kerbal Space Center got sick of me wasting all their funds building rockets to Dres, because who even cares about Dres, and the Blunderbirds have been consuming most of the program's budget as it is, and as a consequence of this Jool 5 mission, it had to be done on the cheap. Nothing will be left in space, every single part is going to be recovered, and obviously it takes a form factor of a spaceplane. Of course, this aircraft itself is incapable of performing all of the actual landings itself, but contained within its cargo bays are an assortment of auxiliary craft to perform landings for Tylo, Val, Bop, and Pol. Now, as much as I would have liked to have been able to land the spaceplane on every single moon, this is just not mathematically possible in the stock game, due to the fact that you need a high thrust-to-weight ratio. The main limiting factor here is Tylo. If we were doing a Jool 4 mission, which is just Lathe, Val, Pol, and Bop, then it would be entirely possible to do a Jool 4 mission with a full spaceplane, no separate landers. But alas, we're not doing that, so we can't do that. So some of you may remember that I've done this before, all the way back in 2016. Just a Jool 5 mission, that is, not an SSTO, Jool 5, etc. But that was ages ago. And, you know, it used a big rocket, whereas this one doesn't. And that's it. There are a couple of extra layers of challenge in that video that I didn't do this one. I said that really incoherently, didn't I? First of all, in that video, the challenge was no ion engines, which we are using ion engines in this video, and every Kerbal had to land on the surface of each moon in a lander can rather than on a command seat, which again, maybe if I put a bit more thought and time into designing this craft, I could have come up with a solution to keep doing that rule here, but, you know, I couldn't be bothered, and I feel like this mission's already as impressive enough as it is. We don't need to keep on, you know, adding more layers. So you may notice throughout the course of this video, actually, it's a very long video, but I didn't want it to be, you know, excessively long. So a lot of the time I'm not going to be showing too many parts where I'm just creating maneuver nodes. Most of it's just going to be showcasing the burns, and you can kind of just figure it out, because if you need help making maneuver nodes and doing interplanetary flights, don't use this video as a guide. This is very much, without wanting to sound arrogant or anything, this is very much a late game challenge. Like, you shouldn't be doing this unless you have a pretty good grasp of gravity assists and just, you know, generally playing the game, I suppose. But all of that being said, there is educational value to this video. I mean, whilst you might not be able to copy the flight de facto, you'll be able to, like, appreciate some of the things I'm doing and see, like, hey, we're doing a MUN gravity assist just to save a fractional amount of fuel. I mean, the Kerbal engine readout does say, what does it say? It keeps changing, actually, but it says we've got I'm just watching the delta V total. It's changing, it's fluctuating quite a bit because I'm cutting the footage up bite to bit to try and save as much time as possible. But yeah, we have I think we had like 11,000 units of delta V in LKO, which is obviously not true. I don't think you can actually get that much from just a nuclear engine craft. Certainly not one with a dry mass as enormous as this craft's. But as I said earlier, this mission will be using ion engines and separate landers, and so Kerbal Engineer gets confused by the fact we've got multiple engines in different stages and docked craft and things, and because we've got Xeon engines as well, that's going to increase it again. So you can calculate it by hand. I've left the mass from the Roads to Juno challenge. I've left that in the display still. So you can calculate this yourself. The dry mass of the craft, or as in the dry mass of the craft but with all the landers fully loaded and things, it's about 125,855 That's the mass. So in case you don't know how to calculate delta V, which is what I had to do to work out if I had enough fuel at various stages in the mission, you do... what is it? I've got to remember now. So in this case, because we're using nuclear engines, we take the ISP of the nuclear engines, as in the efficiency, which for nuclear engines is 800. So you take 800, times it by the gravity constant in Kerbal Space Program, which is always 9.8, which gives you, 7,840. And then you times that by the natural logarithm of the wet mass, as in, the mass of the craft, as in what you're seeing on the screen now on the Kerbal engineer readouts, and divide that by the dry mass, which is what the number I just said, 125,855, and that gives you the delta V. So in LKO, let's see what I had. I'm looking at my notes. I had 5,298 meters per second of delta V in LKO, which of course is not enough for a conventional Jool mission. So you may have noticed on screen, because this is what's been happening on the screen for the past 5 minutes and 52 seconds. We've been doing a series of gravity assists, the standard, Eve assist, Kerbin assist to get to Jool. You save a bunch of fuel this way. I didn't end up doing it the most efficiently. I did it really efficiently up until this point, at which point I got bored and couldn't be bothered to carry on fine-tuning maneuver node, so I just did a massive burn of just over 100 meters per second to get our actual Jool encounter sorted. But there you can see we're doing another gravity assist here that has been lined up nicely. We're going to actually circularize at Jool using a Tylo gravity assist. And you might see it's sort of oscillating back and forth, even though I'm not changing the throttle. That's because I have a tiny amount of monopropellant in this ship. Well, we had 40 units to begin with, and I just have a couple of RCS blocks, and you can just tap back and forth on the monopropellant tanks, monopropellant controls, just to do very fine-tuned maneuvers. Because we're going to be a lot of gravity assists and planning burns several orbits in advance, we're going to be having sort of very precise movements, and so it's very useful to have a tiny bit of monopropellant. We're not going to use any of the RCS for docking, but just for doing fine-tuned maneuvers. And there's our second, unintentional but still quite helpful gravity assist from Tylo. And then of course we can swing around to lathe. So we had to do quite a big burn at this point, because I'd neglected to check my inclination around Jool and realised I was massively tilted, and I didn't really bother doing many quick saves, so I couldn't get to a point where I could have remedied it. Oh, little accidental Val assist there. And so I just thought, you know what, we've probably got enough fuel at this point, so we'll just do a correction burn. And, spoiler alert, by the way, we did have enough fuel to do this mission. So we can do an air brake at lathe. We ended up sort of spinning out of control a little bit. If you end up flying this craft, you probably don't need my help if you're confident enough to be undertaking this mission yourself, but just in case, it's not very stable at the moment. I had to pump a lot of fuel into the front, the anterior tanks, just to try and maintain some aerodynamic balance. So that being said, it didn't spin out just then. I know at some point during this mission, during an air brake, it spins out of control, but whatever. You could call that the end of Chapter 1. We are now at Jool. That was probably the hardest part of this mission, to be fair. The actual journey to Jool, stringing gravity assists together. So if you got this far on your own, you're doing pretty well. So now we can open up that cargo bay and have a look inside. And as I mentioned, the landers themselves use, what are they called? Command seats, external command seats, not command pods. So we have to kind of manually put the Kerbals on EVA to get in there. So you can kind of see there's 3 vessels in there. One of them is designed to land on Pol and Bop. In fact, that's this one here. Then we have the middle one, which is the biggest module by far, and that is, of course, the Tylo lander and the Tylo tug. The Tylo lander will be fully recovered, though, just in case some of you might be thinking, oh, I'll make an exemption for Tylo because it's too hard. No, we will be doing a fully recovered Tylo. It's not actually that impressive, but whatever, just in case some of you might have thought. The whole aircraft is the Lathe lander because, it's a atmospheric optimized ship anyway, so I thought, oh, we can just use the whole thing for Lathe. There were interesting complications with that, which we'll cross as we get there. And then the final thing, and in fact, I think it's the smallest module. Dimension-wise, this is the small. Pol and Bop, I think, is the smallest in terms of part count, but the Val land is pretty damn small as well. You can see it's still nestled in there, and it's unique in the fact it's the only one, apart from obviously the main space plane, that doesn't have Xeon engines. But we'll come on to that as we get there. So we may as well start with what I think is probably the most interesting part of the mission, at least most interesting of the Jool planets to land on, and that is, of course, the Tylo lander. I say it's the most interesting because it's probably the hardest part of this mission. I would argue either Tylo or Lathe are the hardest, but no, I don't know. Tylo's definitely the hardest. So, our craft consists of an enormous battery of batteries, over 10,000 units of electric charge. So we have an enormous, because we're going to have to do some big burns during this mission, and we've got quite a heavy dry mass because we have that fully laden lander that uses oxidizer and liquid fuel. The reason I've kind of got 2 modules. We have the Xeon for the actual lathe to Tylo transfer, because Xeon engines are the most efficient engines in the game. They're much more efficient than nuclear engines even, but they're very weak, and Tylo especially needs a pretty high thrust-to-weight ratio to land on. I mean, nuclear engines struggle to land on Tylo, so Xeon engines, you got no chance. And you can see here, you can show the terrible thrust-to-weight ratio. We had to do several burns at periapsis. Our electric charge kept running out, so we couldn't do it in one big burn. So I just showed them all there because, like I said, I don't want this video to drag on too long. And I mean, it has definitely dragged on too long, but I mean, I don't want it to drag on excessively long. So there we are, nice low Tylo orbit, and then we can begin our retrograde burn. So it's a kind of an interesting design. It almost looks a bit like a Dalek, do you not think, with those round tanks attached to the end? There is a purpose for those. Well, there's two purposes. First is that we need that extra fuel to get enough range to land on the surface, but it does also serve as a means of getting back onto the ship, so we don't need a ladder. Our Kerbal can sort of scramble on those, peripheral tanks to climb up onto the main one. And there we are. Touchdown. Yeah, you have to touch down fairly gently. He says as I touch down at 6 meters per second, because Tylo, it's essentially the same as Kerbal in terms of its size and gravity. It's slightly smaller, but not to a significant amount. But the catch is that it has no atmosphere, so you can't slow down with parachute. So you have to do your entire deceleration using engines, which means that you need kind of a minimum of about 2,300 units of, well, I think it's 2,270 is the exact number you need. So you can see I was very, very close to the edge on this one. So you need 2,270 meters per second of delta V to land, and exactly the same to take off again. So yeah, I mean, obviously this mission is very much at the bleeding edge of fuel limits and things. To an extent, actually. I mean, some parts were massively over-engineered, but we'll get to those as we get there. So yeah, we didn't quite have enough fuel to actually reach the same orbital height as the tug, but we did have enough to stabilize our orbit at least, and then we'll just perform the rendezvous with our ion tug. Now, almost counterintuitively, I actually wanted to burn off as much fuel as I could with the, I'm going to do a nice little low flyby. So obviously, the lander is currently ahead of us, so we had to catch up to it. So we lowered our orbit, so we were on a shorter path around the moon, so we would kind of we would catch up to it, if that makes sense. Like on a running track, for example, the inner lane is faster than the outside lane because it's shorter. Similar principle of capturing. And then, once we got ourselves on a trajectory, we just put ourselves on a nice slow, like 0.5 meter per second counter, line up the docking ports and just watch it. And there we go, beautifully. So yeah, not much more to say about that really. We have enough fuel to get back to Lathe, but rather than, do that now, I mean, we can raise our orbit to a safe height, but then we can get on to the next part of the mission. So there's our Val lander I've used Val to do the Val landing because of course I did. But we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to do the next hardest part of the mission. I don't know if I should, well, I will mention, I don't know why I would say, I don't know if I should. I didn't actually do any tests prior to doing this flight, which in hindsight was very ballsy. I mean, I made sure the Tylo lander worked, but that was the only thing I made sure worked. I just kind of assumed everything else would work based on the Delta V readout, so I thought I'll start with Tylo and Lathe, because out of all the things that could go wrong, those will be the things that go wrong. So I thought I'd do the two hardest moons first. So we've just done Tylo, now we're going to do Lathe. And obviously Jebediah is at the helm of the spaceplane. I feel like I should talk about the spaceplane actually. I haven't actually discussed it much very much yet. But yeah, as you can see, it is a monstrous SSTO based on the Artemis fuselage. Actually, there wasn't really a lot to talk about, but it's called the Dragon, just because it has a big wingspan. And actually, I really like the way it came out. I think, aesthetic-wise, it's one of my better-looking SSTOs. I mean, I always design my SSTOs a little bit with aesthetics in mind. Like, I like to imagine them as being something you could potentially see in real life, or in, like, a Star Wars film or something. I want them to look impressive and look cool. I mean, yeah, I could probably get a lot more out of them if I, sacrificed a little bit of weight and just kind of made it pure function over form. Like, at the moment, it's got quite a nice aesthetic design with those almost, cosmetic wings. Some of those, the pieces behind the big S Delta wings. It doesn't really need those, but it's just that they're just there to enhance the look. I mean, they provide a bit of lift, I guess. But yeah, I definitely put a lot of thought into how craft look as well as how they function. So, and I think I pretty much nailed it with this craft. I think it came out really well, and obviously, as I said, it's very functional. Aside from one particular aspect of it, although actually we can just watch the landing. Here we go. So I've got some parachutes on there to assist, so there we go. I had to kind of just hit stage because I didn't toggle the parachutes to an action group, because every single action group I had in the stock game was already toggled to something, so parachutes I just have to use with the staging, but whatever. But that's why the engines all turned on, and there we are. And you may notice at this point the design flaw I'm talking about, I forgot to add a ladder to get from the cockpit to the surface, which is a bad thing on Lathe because Lathe's gravity is too strong for jetpacks, for the EVA packs to work, not jetpacks. But luckily, I found a way. Well, my genius, you know, it never fails me, because that doesn't sound arrogant at all. But there is a way I found out to plant a flag, because by God, we're going to plant a flag on every mission, on every landing, I should say. So what we're going to do, we're going to plant our flag right up close to the cockpit like this. Yeah, we can do our text. And then watch this, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready? Are you ready for this? We can climb onto the flag. Glitched out a little bit there. But we can climb onto the flag there and then use that to climb up. What can I say? What can I say? As if... Anyway, yeah. What can I say? Leave a comment below how much you how much you are going to use that tip. Don't just add ladders. The amount of fuel you're saving in terms of drag, it's not... This is why I should have tested this craft really, because then I would have immediately realised, I need to add a ladder. But hey, I didn't, so that's cool, I guess. But yeah, do our nice little ascent from Lathe. Much easier to take off from Lathe because obviously you'll have far less fuel than you did for Kerbin. I'm pretty sure you use up... Do you use over half? I feel like you use about half your fuel with SSTOs to get off from Kerbin. At least I do, because I'm a terribly inefficient pilot, I think. But whatever. Lathe is quite easy to ascend on, A, because you'll have less fuel, like I said, but also you can actually get yourself on a orbital trajectory, like make your raise your apoapsis out of the atmosphere on just air-breathing engines. You don't really need any oxidizer whatsoever to get into Lathe orbit, which is always nice, if provided you've got enough thrust from the Rapiers, that is. For example, the most recent Blunderbirds episode, the aquatic Lathe seaplane, that didn't have enough, that didn't produce enough thrust to raise our apoapsis out of Lathe's atmosphere, which is... Well, 50,000 meters is the limit, and our apoapsis is soaring past the 70,000 mark, so we're easily going to make it into orbit. So then we can just switch over to our more efficient nuclear engines. We do have a little bit of oxidizer left, but the nuclear engines, they have enough thrust for what we need to do in this maneuver, and they're far, far more efficient than the closed cycle Rapiers. So there's no reason to actually use that oxidizer. It's a real shame you can't dump fuel in this game. But whatever, like I say, this is a good cost-saving mission, because we're not dumping any parts, so we'll be able to recover that oxidizer and sell it to the black market, or, you know, I don't know. Anyway, now we're back in a safe Lathe orbit. We've now done Tylo and Lathe, the two hardest parts of this mission. So let's go to the next hardest part, or at this point, it's only Val, Pol and Bop remaining, and they're all pretty easy by comparison. So Val, it's about the same as the Mun in terms of landing on it. So I've got about 5,000 meters per second of delta V in this lander, because we need a little bit to actually land on Val, and also we need a little bit to do the interplanetary transfer. And like every other planet on Jool apart from Lathe, it has no atmosphere, so no aerobraking maneuvers are going to be possible. But it doesn't matter. Like I say, it doesn't take a huge amount of fuel to land on, and this is a very lightweight lander, so we've got a really nice thrust to weight ratio, like almost 20 apparently, according to that. Never mind. About 4.8. I don't know where I saw the word 20. Maybe I looked at the wrong thing. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I didn't bother kind of doing a proper circularization. I just put myself on a ballistic trajectory and just hit the brakes when we needed to. Touching down nice and slowly. There we are. I feel like I said earlier, I don't want this mission to drag on too long. We're already approaching the 20-minute mark, and we're barely even halfway in terms of what I want to talk, what we need to showcase in this mission. So we don't need to dedicate too much time to the actual Val, you know, EVA itself. And there we are. Actually, it would be more efficient to have got into orbit the other way around, but by default, Kerbal Engineer, just the game, it defaults the nav ball perspective, as in like where you're controlling from, to be the direction the Kerbal is facing, as in, you know, where their, like, imagine where their eye line points, that's their visual axis. That's where the nav ball defaults its control point to. So I pointed 90 degrees, realised I wasn't actually controlling from the docking port at the top, which is where I want to be controlling from. And so it meant I was going backwards along Val's rotation, if that makes sense. But it didn't matter, because the rotational gains from Val are very negligible. And yeah, I feel like it wasn't really even worth me talking about this, really. But hey, I've got to drag this commentary out somehow. But yes, now we can get to the Pol and Bop lander, which, you know, you can land on Pol and Bop with basically just Ion. They're very similar to Minmus. I think Pop. I'm trying to remember which is easier to land on. So yeah, Pol takes 130 meters per second to land on. Minmus takes 180 meters per second. So Pol is actually easier than Minmus. And Bop takes an enormous 230 meters per second. Well, it's only 50 units more than Minmus. So all of them can be done with just ion engines. So it was fairly easy to design the lander for this. I just strapped a load of batteries and some solar panels together. And hey, what do you know? We've got ourselves a nice little lander here. And I used the big panels. I guess we didn't really need to, but the power, or I guess solar panels don't really work very well as far out as Jool, so I needed to use the big panels. And again, ion engines are very overpowered. Look at the delta V. This is very over-engineered for what we needed it to be. So as a consequence of that, I was being very inefficient. I just said, just get an encounter and we can just do the rest. We can see our thrust to weight ratio might suddenly plummet. That's because if you notice the electric charge drops, we run out of electric charge, so we're basically just able to, we're using up the electricity as we generate it. So we have the 2 panels and the RTG. So on the resources panel, the electric charge kind of sits at 1.02, I think it was at. That just means we're having to then use electricity as we generate it, which means we're not able to get as much power out of the craft, which is why the thrust weight ratio drops, in case you're not aware of that phenomenon. And there we are, touching down in a second. There we are. You may have also noticed as well, because ion engines are boring, and that's why I think this is actually the first time I've ever used ion engines in my life. So, and not even for videos, just in general. But look at that, actually. Talking about where we landed. Pol is it's a very underrated destination, actually, Pol. It's quite impressive. Got all these nice little geographical, I don't know, gnome hats. That's the, I'm coining, that's the term. Copyrighted, Matt Lowne 2018, the gnome hats of Pol. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, yes. Like I said, ion engines are very boring, but you might have noticed throughout certain parts of this video, I'm actually sort of doing physical time warp through burns, but faster than ×4. And that's because I'm using the mod Better Time Warp, which means you can set custom time warp, as in you can change your physics time warp to be whatever you want. So I'm able to get up to 10 times physical time warp, which is a godsend for ion engines. I've tried making it faster, but it ends up just sort of crackening the ship. So I found that 10 seems to be the limit, at least for me. I mean, it very much depends on the complexity of the craft as well. So you might have some success going faster than 10, but I feel like 10's good enough, to be honest. So just a short period to wait for our BOP transfer window. Again, I guess I didn't really need to be that efficient. I could have brute forced an encounter, but whatever. This was easier. And there we go. We have ourselves a nice BOP encounter. So again, well, look at that. We've got nearly 7,000 meters per second of fuel. So it's going to be pretty easy to get our landing sorted. But we are approaching, ladies and gentlemen, a tragic situation. You see, you may remember back in ancient times when this video started, I said that one of the challenges I set myself was not only to land a Kerbal on every single moon's surface, but also to plant a flag, which I guess is more of a symbolic thing, so it isn't really part of this, part of the, I guess, impressiveness of the mission. But I made a bit of an oversight here. I forgot that Kerbals only actually carry one flag, and getting back on the command seat doesn't replenish their flag supply. So when I landed on BOP, I realised my mistake, and then I thought about it. I have enough fuel to get back to the space plane in orbit of Lathe to get Bob like another flag, but then I thought, no, I'm too lazy. So I just went ahead and edited the save file here. We can just change that to 1, and just like that, Bob remembered that he brought another flag, so he could plan one on BOP. I mean, I feel like this is an acceptable case of save file hacking to cheat in missions, because it doesn't affect it doesn't affect the mission at all. So I hope you guys will forgive me this one time. So I guess I think I've pretty much exhausted all the things I can talk about on this mission as we're going. You can probably figure out what's going on, but hey, take a moment to appreciate how scary this must be for the Kerbals rocketing around a massive gas giant on basically a lawn chair that's strapped to a bunch of thrusters. I think I do recall being in a similarly scary transport situation, which I guess we could use as a segue into story time with Matt. Now, I know that every one of you who lives in England, this will be a resounding yes, but 35% of my audience, according to YouTube Analytics, is from America, so you may not be familiar, but if you've ever seen the show The In-Betweeners, if you haven't, by the way, it's an amazing show, you need to watch it. They have this car called a Fiat Chinkichenko. It's like a cartoon car. It's ridiculous. Oh, here's our escaping from Tyler, by the way. Okay, whatever. You guys can figure out what's going on by this point. It's a terrible car. It's like a tiny... I can't describe it. I don't know how to describe it other than the fact it looks like a cartoon car. It's got tiny little wheels. It's shaped like a box. And it's just very old. And it's hilarious to see until my friend got one and had to give me a lift somewhere. And basically for the entire journey, I was taking the mickey out of his car. Don't want to be saying any swear words on this Christian channel. No hashtag no demonetization for me. And I was just taking the mick out of him the whole time, like, oh, this car, oh, you're really pushing it to the limits of its braking power as you slow down for a traffic light. And he said, you know what? Enough is enough, Matt. I'm fed up with you taking the mickey out of me for my car. I love this car, you know. I'm going to show you what it can do. And I was like, oh, yeah, not really thinking about what I was saying. And so he took us onto the bypass. So a bypass, it's like in England we have a lot of little villages and things and connected by country roads. Sometimes we build bypasses. They're like kind of dual carriageways that kind of go around. Normally you'd have to drive through a little village and then we build a bypass that just bypasses the village, if that makes sense. So you can... It's a dual carriageway basically. He took us onto it. It would have been easy if I just started by saying we went to a dual carriageway, but hey, I have to drag this video comes here somehow. He says, right, I'm going to show you what this baby can do. So I look ahead. It's perfect road conditions. A normal car would have had no problem doing this. Oh, by the way, maybe just talk about this. I tried docking the Tyler lander, then remembered that it doesn't actually fit because it's meant to be the Val lander connected first, then the Tyler lander, and then the Pol and Bop lander. So the docking ports are they're recessed in the case of the Tyler lander, so they couldn't actually connect. I made a mistake here as well. I accidentally synced up my periapsis around Lathe to be where the gravity assist would take us, so we're actually on a collision course with Lathe at this point without me realising. You can kind of see the other orbital line that just goes straight into the surface on that map screen view. That's the one I was actually adjusting, so I did realise my blunder and I rectified it later on, so we kind of wasted a bit of fuel. But like I said earlier, actually, I think I started saying this earlier and then changed the subject for some reason. It was actually in my interest to drain as much fuel from the landers as possible because then this would minimise the dry mass for the space plane itself for when it came to getting back to Kerbal. So, you know, it didn't really make a difference. Anyway, back to the story. So a normal car would have been able to do this road just fine. It was a straight road, dry conditions, sunny weather, perfect. But not the Fiat Cinquecento. So he goes, right, that's it. He drops it down to third or whatever gear we needed to be in, floored it, and immediately the whole thing kind of like it was a scary noise. It sounded like the car was in pain. So I'm like, okay, whatever, this is fine. And then we approach like, I don't know, 35 miles an hour, and the car begins to kind of feel unsafe, as in like more unsafe than it did anyway. First of all, it starts to sort of shake back and forth a little bit. I'm like, oh, whatever, this is probably just wind resistant, it's fine. I held onto the little handle above the window just in case. We get to about 45. At this point, I hear this sound. It's like a vibrating sound, like a sound. I was like, what's that? And he goes, oh, don't worry, that's just the glass vibrating in the windows. I was like, oh, I don't think that's normal, actually. I don't think that's what's supposed to happen. No, that's all this car does, it's fine. Then we get to about 50 miles an hour. At this point, I think the world's going to end. The car is rattling around very much like the space shuttle on re-entry, or perhaps this SSTO when we were entering Lathe's atmosphere, keeping the story topical. So it starts shaking around, like I think this is it. This is the end. This is how it ends for Matt Lowne. I hadn't even played Kerbal Space Program at this point, so my life had basically amalgamated to nothing at this point. I had so much to live for, you know. And I was like, my life was flashing before my eyes at this point. We probably get to like 50 at this point, probably like 60 miles an hour. And at this point, the back windows, they're not the kind of windows that you roll down. They're kind of the ones that you push out, if that makes sense. They kind of, anyway, they just opened spontaneously. So then not only is the whole car vibrating, like shaking and rattling around, now there's just constant air rushing in as well. So it's like I was in a dream. And then we get to like 70 miles an hour and I'm just like, okay, you made your point. I choose life at this point. And so we came off the bypass, and that was the time I nearly died in a Fiat Cinquecento. I mean, it was probably fine. I mean, he says that it can easily do 80 miles an hour. I'm like, well, it couldn't easily do 50 miles an hour, Rob, so it probably can't, but I'll take your word for it. He goes, well, I could show you if you want. Nah, you know what? I choose to believe you. Of course, between you and me, I didn't believe him, but I wasn't going to say that now. Anyway, let's have a look at the video. About 14,000, not 14,000, about 1,400 meters per second. It's probably a little bit less than that because we have some, still a little bit of excessive kind of misreadings from the landers, although I have disabled the Xeon tanks in the landers, which I probably should have done from the get-go, but whatever. So it's a fairly accurate representation of how much delta V we have at this point. So we don't have a lot left, but we can easily get back on this by using some gravity assists. Like before, we used gravity assists to get to Jool. We can use some gravity assists to get out of Jool. So I couldn't quite get a big enough Tylo gravity assist to get our periapsis around the sun to the right level, so I did a little burn at Tylo periapsis, utilizing the Oberth effect there to get a bit more efficiency out of our engines, and then it wasn't actually quite the right level, so I did a few little burns just as we were escaping Jool to get our periapsis at the right height, and then there we go. So a small burn of 90 meters per second to get our to get an encounter with Kerbin. Not going to be our first time. This isn't going to be the time at which we, re-enter Kerbin. If anyone's seen any of my spaceplane missions to Jool before, I mean, how many have I done now? I did the Elu SSTO, then I did the Elu and Lathe SSTO, then I did my Lathe SSTO, and I've done my Tylo SSTO. So this is the 5th video, I think, in which I've done an SSTO to Jool and Elu, or Jool or Elu, I suppose. So I have talked about the methodology in doing this. So I've talked about kind of the Eve, Kerbin gravity assist to get to Jool, which is why I didn't really touch on it at all in this video. But I have also talked about this. We're going way too fast to re-enter Kerbin at this point. We didn't have enough fuel to manually circularize on engine, so we did a flyby just to reduce our periapsis around the sun to a fraction of what it was. And then we're going to do another encounter to Kerbin. And I thought at this point about doing... I didn't intend for this to be the final Kerbin encounter. I was going to do another Kerbin flyby after this burn here. So the original plan was to fly by here, putting ourselves on a nice and low solar orbit, and then encounter Kerbin again and have a nice low re-entry speed, and it would have been fine. But then I realized I'm actually probably going slow enough to re-enter at this point. I mean, I would have had to do some crazy spinning to get ourselves circularized at Kerbin, but I was thinking about a few things. First of all, my hard drive was rapidly filling up with Fraps footage. The footage for this video came to about 1.9 terabytes, which is quite a lot. I didn't want to waste too much more time filming an even longer part of the mission, like making the mission go on even longer. So I thought I'd just do it now. So I'm kind of doing this crazy spinning roll. I didn't speed up the footage just at the beginning to kind of show you what it looks like in real time, because people always say, oh, it looks really unrealistic and stupid how fast you spin them. I'm playing the footage back at a high speed just so the video doesn't become way too long. So you are watching accelerated footage, but yeah, it is still somewhat unrealistic in terms of... It is unrealistic, but whatever. It makes sure the video is nice and short, and we're not actually done planting all of our Jool 5 flags, because like I said, I said ancient times before, so now we're like prehistoric times. When the video started, I said, I've done a Jool 5 mission before, and in that Jool 5 mission, I brought way too much fuel. Well, I brought a bit too much fuel with me. I mean, if I did that mission today, it was way too much fuel. I was much more inexperienced at the game at that point, but... Yes, I'm getting sidetracked. I brought way too much fuel on that mission, and I've brought way too much fuel on this mission. I mean, the Pol and Bop lander still has an enormous amount of Delta V left. And in my previous Jool 5 mission, I used that excess Delta V to perform a Minmus landing. And so I feel like it would only be kind of fitting in with tradition at this point if we did a Minmus landing as well. Now, I guess I don't really need to talk about... I can probably show this footage in fairly abridged fashion, because, I mean, you've already seen me land on Pol and Bop, and as I said earlier, Minmus is basically... It falls between the two in terms of ease to land on. So there's virtually no suspense in terms of my ability to land on Minmus. And now we're around Kerbin, much closer to the sun. We can produce electricity faster than we burn it, so it was easy, basically. And there's Jebediah, looking nice and happy there. I mean, I could have tried to be even more efficient with the spaceplane and landed the spaceplane on the surface of Minmus, which I think we probably could have done. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm sure we could have done it, actually. Why didn't I do that? Whatever. I kind of wanted to just be lazy, and it's like, I can guarantee I'll do it first time with the Xeon lander, so whatever, we'll just do it with the Xeon lander. But anyway, at this point, the plan was to obviously exit Minmus orbit with the Ion lander. I keep saying Xeon lander, then Ion lander, whatever. You know, the little lander. It was to redock with the spaceplane, and the whole thing would do an air brake, and obviously land at the Kerbal Space Center again. But our orbit was actually sort of passing, it was intruding on the Mun's sphere of influence, so the spaceplane ended up crashing into the Mun whilst I was getting the Ion probe back to docking with it. So I had to kind of do an air brake with the spaceplane itself to lower our apoapsis, so we're not going to be ending up on a Mun collision, and then obviously raise our periapsis again to make sure we stay in orbit, and then we'll switch back to the Minmus lander. And again, also, I feel like I've been really incoherent as this commentary's gone. I'm not used to doing commentaries. Have I ever done a commentary this? I think I have, actually. Yeah, the Expedition Eve director's commentary and the Juno Attacks director's commentary were both longer than this one. But in terms of talking about an actual mission, like a singular mission, this has been hard, guys. I'm gonna have to lie down in a dark room for a long time after this and just think about what I'm gonna. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, not much more to say about that really. You've seen me rendezvous many a time, not only in this video but in general, so we can probably skip through most of the maneuvers that I adopted to get ourselves on a rendezvous encounter with the spaceplane. But you'll see me do a little thing in a minute. I'll be getting Jebediah out of the command seat and docking the probe back into the ship on its own, and then Jebediah can just obviously just getting back into the spaceplane. I did this earlier as well when Bob had to get off and get into the spaceplane around Lathe orbit, and then I just docked the probe, remotely. And that's because when it's docked inside the cargo bay, for whatever reason the Kerbal just kind of glitches through and breaks the solar panels, which isn't a big deal because we didn't really need them at this point, but I kind of wanted to stick to the whole, everything is recovered, nothing is lost, and all that stuff. So that's why I had to disembark first. I don't know, is that really important? Because it results in the same thing anyway, it doesn't affect anything. But again, I've got to drag this out somehow. How long has this been going on for now? 36 minutes. So we're definitely getting there. Getting there. I'm really proud of you guys. You've made it so far. And obviously you guys have got to watch the music video afterwards, so that's even more you don't have to. But, I'm not... It's unmonetizable because... as is the previous Jool 5 mission as well, if you wanted to watch that. But both of them are unmonetizable because they use copyrighted music. So this isn't like I'm not financially motivated by asking you to watch it. I'm proud of that video, and I think you guys would enjoy it. So maybe not watch it right away because you're probably a little bit burned out on just not just my content, but probably Jool and Kerbal Space Program videos in general, because this video was very long. But like I say, I feel like whilst it was long in length, I didn't leave too many, I didn't show much filler. In fact, I feel like I still cut out too much. I would have liked to have shown more of me planning maneuver nodes and rendezvousing and things like that, but, I had to make sacrifices somewhere. That's actually why I stopped making, I say this in every video at this point, but that's why I stopped making music videos, because I had to cut out too much footage, and it was rather heartbreaking to see me having to throw away so much, but whatever. There's the Kerbal Space Center there. Not a lot to say, really. A lot of temperature gauges showing up, but again, you guys know this at this point, but I play on full 100% re-entry heating for full disclosure. And there we go. So I guess I can kind of start talking about outro stuff, because normally it gets to the end, and it's the end's going like, right, so top left is this, and Patreon, Discord, and Twitter, all of the description, blah, blah. I get really panicked because I just end waffling for ages and then have to cram everything in the last 10 seconds. But if you would like to follow me on Twitter, then because Twitter followers would have heard about this mission beforehand. Follow me on Twitter, it's in the description. Join my Discord as well if you want to hang out with me and my other subscribers. Shout out to everyone from the server. And also you get I show previews and snapshots and inside stuff on the Channel of Matt section of the Discord server, so there's that as well. There's also Patreon in the description as well if you want to help support the channel a little bit, but I don't like trying to make people feel obligated to give to Patreon. You by all means don't if you can't afford it. And that's pretty much this video wrapped up. And well, aside from one crucial part, we have one final flag to plant. And there we go, marking Kerbin with Jebediah in the craft strangely able to levitate there. Something wrong with the camera there, but there it is. And yeah, what a satisfying mission to finally pull off. But yes, that's this video wrapped up on screen. Top left is the music video. Again, highly recommend that if you want to see that. Top right is the other Jool 5 mission I did all the way back in 2016. Bottom left is my most recent upload, whatever that may be. And the bottom right was just chosen for you by YouTube's algorithm. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.